All right, guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of the CX Chronicles podcast. Super excited to welcome Michael Yinger from Resume Sieve. Michael, welcome to the CXC podcast, my friend.
Hey, I'm happy to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. So, guys, Michael has a super cool story and background. He's done a bunch of awesome work at a number of really, really cool companies all over the place. And he's here today to talk with us about his personal journey and some of the things that he's kind of picked up and learned along his own way around team tools, process, and feedback. So, Michael, why don't you start off the show as we start off all these episodes? Take a couple minutes just to set the stage for the CX Nation. Give them a sense for how you became a customer-focused business leader that you are today, and certainly tell us about how you came about helping to co-found and build a company like Resume Sieve.
Sure, absolutely. It has been an interesting journey, as you said. I think I characterize it as I may be in my third or fourth career. I've moved from different industries and completely different focus. And what I've learned along the way is, you hit on it, the importance of the customer and how that plays in what goes on within the organization. So, I've been an individual contributor. I've helped organizations get set up. And the last 20 years, mostly I've been in the talent acquisition space. And there's a whole different set of customers, right? The people that you're trying to hire that are expecting a certain kind of experience and will go elsewhere if they're not getting the kind of experience that they think they deserve or think they should have. And I will tell you right now, in spite of what's going on with hiring and the size of the industries, the candidate experience is pretty terrible today. And so there's so much room to make that better. They're just it's simple things. How do you communicate with them? How do you what kind of technology are you using? Anyway, but I won't get too deep into that at the moment. So I've been in talent acquisition for about 20 years and in a variety of roles, implementation, technology management, sales, client delivery, product management, and even sourcing. And my latest venture is I'm actually part of a team that we've launched a company we call Resume Sieve, and our focus is to enhance the recruiting process. So the customer, in this case for us, it's the recruiter who's dealing with, difficult challenges. In some ways, there's almost too much technology for the recruiters to deal with. There's not a consistent set of tools, certainly from company to company, and the opportunity to improve the tool set is something that we're focused on. We're at the very front end of the process with evaluating and ranking resumes, and then we've partnered with another company that does a diagnostic around human potential. And so the two of those things together, measuring hard skills and soft skills. And so we've been around for about a year and a half. I was at loose ends, like a lot of people, with following COVID, and so I was doing some consulting. The folks at Resume Sieve called me up and said, "Look, we were talking to you earlier about being on our board. Would you like to continue the conversation?" I said, "Sure." Get on the phone. They said, "We want you to come in and help us set up the company." So that's how I got moved to the inside and have been hands-on in both CEO and COO roles in terms of, just getting the mechanics of the company set up and ensuring that we are focused on, and this is so funny and it's so appropriate with your topic, focused on what the customer wants, because, we all know what the application should do. We all know what we want it to do. But as I say every time, what does the customer want? What are the people telling us? What's going to make it easier for them to work with us, not the other way around? I had a conversation with one of my compatriots yesterday. We were talking about a contract, and I said, "Yeah, that sounds all really great for us, but what about them? Is that really what they want? Because they're not going to agree to it if it's not."
Yep.
Let's make sure we're looking at this from the right direction. We need to be looking at this from the way I view customer experiences. We need to be looking at ourselves from the outside, not looking out from ourselves to the outside, because then you're considering the wrong kind of things.
Yep, 100% agree, man. I couldn't agree more. I think the other thing is just like, what a time for this, Michael. You guys picked a hell of a time to be able to think about how you can go out and help a bunch of employers and a bunch of customers get really, really good and get really, really thoughtful with the way that they're thinking about how they're going to hire, how they're going to retain, how they're going to find incredible talent. I mean, you and I were talking about this the other day, Michael, but like with the great resignation upon us, and
Yes.
we've all seen all of these different articles and all these different ridiculous stats talking about, we're in the beginning of a talent migration that the world and the global economy has never ever seen before. People are moving from companies, from company A to company B. People and especially great talent, Michael, right? Especially like cream of the crop A players out there. These folks have a bit of the upper hand as far as compensation, as far as whether they're going to work in a physical location or whether they're going to work remotely. I know that you and I both have friends that are working for huge companies, sitting right at home right now, not having to go to New York City, not having to go to San Francisco, not having to go to Chicago or Miami or some of these big, huge cities where these companies are truly located. And it's a game changer, man. And so I think what's super cool about what you guys are building at Resume Sieve is, like, number one, people need help finding those A players. Number two, hiring just keeps getting harder and harder and harder. I saw a report the other day, Michael, like our fast food restaurants here in America are preparing to pay people $20 an hour to flip our burgers, because that's the new world that we're moving into in terms of labor shortages and just labor demand. And then when you take it to like the professional side of the world, where you're talking about tech or you're talking about specific industries, same types of things are going to happen. So you guys what a time to build a company like this, and what a perfect market to really kind of be a part of helping to disrupt.
Yeah. I mean, you've got. I mean, your points are right on. I think we don't yet know what the true impact is going to be. There's on the one hand, there's some of the tech companies that are saying, we're never going to go back to that. One of the large companies here in Charlotte, where I live, is the Dollar General, the Family Dollar Group.
Okay.
And not too far from me, they had these two huge buildings. One was an office building and one was a warehouse. And of course, during COVID, they basically vacant. And they've recently sold one of the buildings. And it's not because the company's doing bad. The company's doing great because, it's serving a really important demographic, right? But they don't need the space anymore, and they're not going to force their people to come back. I heard a great story about some of the financial companies. They're the ones, particularly in New York. They got the investment of the real estate for one thing. So you have to understand about their motivation. A lot of table thumping. You're going to come back, or we're not going to pay you. And if you moved, we're going to pay you where you live. And a lot of these A players, people coming out of the top drawer schools, they've been sitting at home doing their job, being productive in their jammies.
Yep.
And they don't want to go back. And that's what they're saying. They're saying, go ahead.
These
somebody else will hire me.
Checks just to make sure that people aren't wearing their basketball shorts.
That's right. These people are saying, hey, I'll go somewhere else. So there's the experience, the X in your title is so critical, because it all depends on the perspective you're looking at. One of the pundits in the HR tech space, a guy named Josh Bersin, said something the other day on LinkedIn, that employee experience is as important as customer experience. And my perspective is that employee experience is more important than customer experience, because employee experience drives customer experience. If you've got a terrible employee experience, you are going to have a heck of a time creating a good customer experience. It's just, if you onboarded, or what it takes to get paid, or what insurance you're offering, it's a tough hill to climb to then have those people put on a happy face when they're interacting with your customers.
Completely agree. I think, one of the things that I always ask people on the show, Michael, is just around, like, if you had to call out what the most important of the 4 CX pillars is of team, tools, process, and feedback, which one would it be? 99% of the time people say it's team, Adrian. If you don't have an incredible team, you're not going to have the best toolkit. If you don't have a great team, you're not going to have really smart people coming up with awesome processes, great playbooks, all of these working orders for how to do our roles and our jobs and our day-to-day stuff really well. And then lastly, if you don't have a great team, you're not going to be thinking really, really strategically about how to collect feedback, how to use feedback, how to act on feedback, and how to constantly push the business into a more positive direction by using that fuel, right? So completely agree. Michael, I'd love to jump into the first CX pillar of team. Why don't you spend a couple minutes talking about the team that you're building over there, sir?
Yeah, so it's we have been very deliberate as we've added people. I mean, part of that, just not everybody's up to working on a startup. There's no question, and so you have to find people that are maybe not necessarily passionate from an experience set about what our technology, but certainly passionate about the idea of building something and creating that customer interaction. And so what our approach has been to, as much as possible, hire generalists,
okay,
even if they're in a specific role, because now is the time when everybody's kind of doing everything. I mean, on any given day, I'm paying bills, or I'm talking to investors, or I'm writing copy for an ad post, or I'm doing a demo of the software. You don't know where you're going to be applying yourself. And so that's been the approach for us, is to build a team where people can be multifaceted. Like a lot of companies, we're using external resources, and so all our tech we have outsourced, but we treat them as we're all part of a team. They come to company meetings. We celebrate their holidays with them, and you try to make sure that every once in a while the calls are bad for us, not bad for them, because they're sitting in India, time wise. Little things like that, little things that because we want them to feel like they're part of the success, that they're not just punching code, that they're part of something as we go forward. And so it's an interesting challenge to do that with sort of minimal resources, right? And that's what we have. We're a small company, and most of our dollars are going towards actually building the technology. And so, you do it through the interaction piece, and that's the fun part. Actually, it's allowing you to create that sort of camaraderie and belongingness.
Absolutely. Yep. I think couple quick points. Michael, number one, work is funny, right? Most of us spend more time with our coworkers and with the people that we're building our business or building our team or running our day-to-day operation with than our families and our best friends. That's unfortunately the truth of the matter, right? That's what work is about. So you have to think about how you're sort of optimizing for some of that time, right? If you're going to spend the majority of your time at work or with your team, make it fun, make it interesting, make it collaborative, make it so that like you do have some fun with it. I know everyone's got different appetites for this, but for me, I mean, I couldn't agree more. It's super, super important to have that type of bonding or that type of time where you can actually just like be humans, right? Be humans. Yeah. That's the first part. Yeah. Second part that I love that you brought up that I want to kind of dive into a little bit further is you just brought up another part of team building that I think, again, COVID has changed forever. And that's the idea of we have more and more guests coming on the show talking about some of the fractional extension pieces of their team that they're building, meaning some folks are outsourcing, some folks are leveraging the power of consultants or the power of fractional teammates more than ever before. I've talked with just a few people this week who it's becoming more and more common for going back to the A players. A lot of A players have 2, 3, 4 jobs right now. And they're basically, there was an article I read recently that kind of explained, it's almost like the emergence of this world of campaign-based work. So for folks that have the firepower and they've got the drive and they're ready to rock and roll, you can almost be strategic about which company you help serve specific deliverables. Maybe it's for a quarter, maybe it's for 6 months. There's tons of contract work out there right now. And I think it's interesting because like there's benefits to both the employer and the employee in this situation, right? This is going to be another part of team building and team scaling that I think is going to be really, really interesting to watch as we move into the future.
Yeah, great points on both the team building and the team scaling. You understand the scaling part. That this you're using fractional or just-in-time resources so that you don't have people sitting around, or you can get the right resource for the need. The team building is the interesting part. How do you bring those people in? And so in addition to our tech, of course we've outsourced our accounting.
Okay.
And that's literally 1 to 2 hours a month is all they're spending with us.
Yeah.
And come to the meetings, be part of any sort of celebration that we're doing, because you never know when in that 1 to 2 hours a month that person who's handling that stuff for us could say, "Hey, what about this?"
Yeah.
It is an interesting challenge, and then you add to it. We are a child of COVID, meaning my company. We have never met face to face.
Yep.
I know one of the people that I'm working with from a previous job, literally 20 years ago, and all the rest of it's been nothing but phone, Zoom. We have never been face to face, and at some point we will travel and we will get together, but we haven't yet.
That's wild.
It's been 18 months of working together, and it's commenting on the background if somebody puts up on their Zoom, and noticing when that one of our founders, Mohan, he's a really great guy, technologist by trade, and has lived all over the world. And sometimes he will have on the brightest colored shirt, like orange, and I have to ask him, "Where's the battery?"
Yeah, where's that power source coming from?
Because I don't know how you get that shirt that bright.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's funny though, Mike. I think that you're right. This is the new norm, or in many cases, this will be the new norm. The other piece that's interesting too, though, is just like so many companies and so many contributors inside of companies across the world right now, and from huge companies to medium-sized companies to SMBs, we're all feeling that. Whether it's working, like I know for me at CXC, like it's been 18 months of every one of our new accounts and every one of our customers and every one of the incredible startup companies that we're working for, we haven't met in person. It's been completely based on Zoom. I think the other piece too is similar to Resume Sieve, CXC had a benefit of COVID as well, which was prior to COVID. Typically, when we would get a customer excited or interested in engaging, typically your boy Adrian was getting on an airplane and flying to wherever they were and doing the song, meeting the team in person, doing the walk of the floor wherever that team was, right? And just kind of understanding like the physical sense and the physical beat and the drum beat of the company and kind of what was happening. And then oftentimes it was still minimally once a month or every other month, me or the team would have to be there in the flesh, right? Doing some of the work, doing some of the journey mapping, sitting inside of a conference room and getting people excited about CX and CS. Now it's all here, man. It's all here. It's all on Zoom calls. Most of them are remote working sessions. Obviously, we've completely changed the way that we think about asynchronous work or asynchronous deliverables, where most of the project work that we're doing now, we share it with Michael that day. Michael and his team can start contributing or adding on to the project. This is just a new way. This is just the new way we're going to be doing it. I think for some of our listeners, I know that many of you are already thinking about this stuff, but like every day when you're thinking about optimizing customer experience, employee experience, customer success, think about some of these things, because these aren't going away, guys, right? And at the very least, you need to be thinking about building almost like this hybrid model of all of these hybrid meetings, hybrid deliverables, hybrid project work, hybrid customer interactions, right? Because the reality is we're probably going to be doing a little bit of both of this moving forward, which is a super interesting time to be on this wonderful planet of ours.
Yeah, we're going to be doing it for quite some time. I think that it's, we're not completely past COVID, depending on where you are. And there's Costa Rica just announced you can't come to Costa Rica if you're not vaccinated. So, there are those kinds of things that, and the other thing, just on a very personal level, it took me a while, because in my previous job, I was traveling every week, sometimes twice a week. It took me about 6 weeks of being involved with Resume Sieve and all the meetings and the coordinating. We were hiring a technology company, we were hiring attorneys, we were hiring a CFO and a CTO, all the kind of things we were doing. but that's the nature of this. I'll just keep talking and see if you come back. Oh, there you
Yep.
go. Yeah, more time I had in my day, and so what that's translated to is, having dinner with the family every night. Where, of course, if I wasn't in town, I wasn't having dinner with them, and even then, it was, catch as catch can. So I think this is what the workers are reacting to. This is why you see the Great Resignation, as people are put in a perspective. It's not that people don't want to work.
Yep.
It's that people want to work on their own terms, and those terms have been redefined.
Totally.
And is it going to go back to? I wonder. Is it going to go back to? You don't see it. You don't see signs of it yet. It's they're still running 25-30% occupancy in New York City.
Yep.
I'm just telling you.
Yep. I totally agree, man. I think that there's going to be specific industries, specific businesses, and specific use cases where, yeah, sure, there might be that physical demand. I mean, we all have frontline friends and family who've been working this entire pandemic, right? People that are in hospitals, people that are on the front lines of EMS staff, people that are actually keeping some of our mail moving, right? Some of our friends that are working in UPS and FedEx and Amazon, like every single day they've been working. But I think that you just nailed it, Michael, where for a whole other tranche of workers, we can do a better job by working in a remote fashion. We are happy to be hybrid or flexible when we need to, i.e. if it's once a month, you need to go in to the office to do an on-site and have a really awesome, collaborative, insightful, engaging type of conversation with the team where you're going to be really strategic about the time usage. Great. Awesome. That sounds fun. It gives all of us a little bit of break and it gets us out of our remote offices. But I think that there's too many executives that I've talked with on this show over the last year where their businesses are performing more financially down than they ever have before. Their ENPS or their employee net promoter scores are way up. Their profits and their sales are at historic level. You're not going to change that stuff. You're just not going to change that stuff just to go back to a thing that we were all doing. If anything, many people talk about this. This pushed us ahead. This pushed us ahead about 10 years. It probably shouldn't have happened this quick, and probably we should be having this conversation somewhere in the 2030s. But this is where we're at right now. So, Michael, I'd love to give you a couple minutes to talk about tools. I'm super interested in understanding what are some of the ways that you and the team at Resume Sieve have thought about building out your toolkit, and definitely spend some time talking a little bit about your tool and how you're helping some of your customers with finding incredible applicants and understanding exactly who some of these right matches might be.
Sure. Thanks. In terms of tools, what we look at and what we have been about from the very beginning is our customer is the recruiter, the person doing the work, and our intention is for them to be more productive, meaning that we take away the drudgery so that they can focus on the parts of their job that can't be automated, talking to candidates, talking to hiring managers, those kinds of things, networking as appropriate. So that the tool set that we've created, the first tool that we've created, it's very simple to operate. There are just a few screens. There, the what you can do and how you can do it. The intention was to make the interface as simple and as easy to use as possible to enhance that user experience. What we've been doing lately is taking that one step further, where so we rank and evaluate resumes. Well, the resumes have to get into the system somehow. And in our first iteration, you loaded the resumes into the system. And people are saying, well, I've already got my resumes over here, over there. Can you connect to my system? So that's what we've been focusing on in the last several months. We now have connections with a number of different systems through APIs, so that we're pulling that data in. Again, it's just one more piece of work that we're taking off the plate of the people who are really the ones who are at the front line. Creating a tool set that makes it easier for them to do their jobs. I mean, it's simple things like, if you're looking through resumes, maybe you want to think, well, how long has this person been working, or how long is their average? How long do they stay? Are they a job hopper? We've got those things calculated. Where do they go to school? We've got that pulled out. All these things just to make it easier for the recruiter to make an informed judgment, which is of course what recruiters are doing.
Yep.
We're ranking people on skills. we're not ranking them on, have they worked at the right place? Different companies may be appropriate from an experience set. Somebody's still going to have to look at, I'm hiring for the airline industry, and you've been working in pharmaceuticals your whole career. Is that going to work? It might. It might. Don't get me wrong. The transferable skills. And if you're looking for somebody who knows how to sell, seats on an airplane, is that the same thing as, having been in pharmaceuticals? So there is always going to be that judgment that's going to come into it. Do you have the right level of experience? But again, our focus is making it easier, and making it easier means people are more productive. And then you add to that the company that we partnered with, which is ThinkX. They're looking at the human potential indicators. Human potential indicators really can tell you, is somebody in the right job? Because maybe this job has a pretty high stress level, but the person internally doesn't deal with stress well. Are they going to stay very long?
Yep.
Or the other way around, that you're interviewing high potential people who've a lot of get and go, and the job is putting the chocks on the wheels of the airplane.
Right.
There's not a lot of, you got to be willing to sit around in the heat if you're in Phoenix, in the cold if you're in Minneapolis, in the rain if you're in Florida, waiting to put the chocks under the wheels of the airplane.
Yep.
And so, do you really want to hire somebody who's a real go-getter in terms of customer success and customer support? No, because they're not going to be happy. They're not going to stay. And so there are a lot of different ways to begin to look at the people that you're hiring, even before you talk to them. Some of these tools are getting much more sophisticated in terms of how much time it takes to get a really good understanding of people. The idea is, are you focusing on what is it that you need, so that you're hiring for what you need, as opposed to, all too often hiring is just, sometimes it's the first warm body that comes along. Or I was talking to somebody the other day, a great example of how unconscious bias can work. And I'm not going to shift this into a conversation about DE&I. And what he was saying was, we started the conversation, and we start chit-chatting, and turns out we both like the Yankees.
Okay.
And we spent half an hour talking about the Yankees. The interview's over. That was a great guy. I'm going to hire him. Well, all you know about him is he likes the Yankees.
Wait, isn't that enough? Isn't that enough?
Yeah, well, okay. See,
sounds like it's a winner to me, Michael.
Yeah, it is.
You're talking to a Yankees fan right now, man.
Yeah, I know. I hear you, but that's all these things that people don't want to hire the wrong people, because hiring the wrong people is expensive.
Totally.
It's disruptive of the organization. People want to hire the right people. It's just they're not often sure what the right person is, or how to find that person. And that's where tools like ours come in. A year ago, to say that you had 50 resumes, people would laugh at you and say, I've got 500 resumes. Well, even just going through 50 resumes, by the time you get to the 10, are you still comparing them? Are you still looking for the same things? Because the resumes are all different.
Totally.
They're formatted differently. People with their experience, their education puts it in different places. I was looking at one the other day, and the education was in a column off to the right.
Huh.
Okay, so it makes it hard to skim and scan, and qualitatively and quantitatively, how we review the candidates before we even talk to them, it needs a lot of work, and that's what we're focused on right now.
I love it. I think the first thing it makes me think about is just the parallels between, because obviously on this show, Michael, we spend a ton of time talking about customer journeys and customer onboarding and customer qualification. It's the same thing on the employee side here that we're talking about, meaning your ability, or a company's ability, to do a phenomenal job of essentially qualifying, vetting, segmenting. Let's call it what it is too, because that's the other thing. It's very easy. Let's use your 500 resume pile example. It's pretty darn easy to figure out, okay, there's probably going to be 10% of those 500, 50 of those resumes probably get slid into that A player camp of like, hey, these people are like, they're badass. We want to talk to them. We want to figure out if they want to come work with our team. Maybe you have another 25% that's kind of in that B, where maybe it's a possibility, or maybe comp is going to end up forcing you to have to kind of think in that camp. And then you're going to have the other 50% of them where you probably see right off the bat on the first skin or the first scam, not for us, push it over here to the DQ pile. But what my point is, long-winded way of saying here, for our listeners, if you're not thinking of, especially when you're building these CX teams, these CS teams, these inside sales teams, these customer facing roles, right? You got to have people that are dealing with your customers every single day. Take some time to think about it the same way that some of your friends in sales are building their pipelines and their funnels. Think about what type of qualification efforts you have. Think about how you're going to DQ people. To your point, Michael, I think about every touch point. So every email, maybe every phone call, every text message. A lot of people text with their applicants these days. Those are the same types of touch points that you need to be thinking about mastering on the CX side, right? On the customer side. Right. It's the same thing for the employee. So take a minute with your team this week just to even make sure that your hiring process or your hiring journey or your employee journey is sound, because it's a really easy way of just understanding where you're killing it, where you probably could stand to do a little bit better, and where you might actually need some expertise or some additional outside support to come in and help kind of give you a better lens on what it looks like.
Yeah, it's an evolving process, and you got to be prepared to do that work. It's not fix it once and it's fixed forever.
Big time.
Because people are changing.
Michael, I'd love to pick your brain. 1 or 2 minutes. Have there been any quick wins or just like early gains that you and the team at Resume Sieve have seen when it comes to process? Are there a couple things that you guys have been doing really well out of the gates over the last year and a half as you're building and scaling the business and the team that you've really kind of have kind of pinned towards, focusing on process or keeping your team kind of focused on the process side of things?
Yeah, I realized once we got beyond just a couple of people, just keeping track of all of the action items that we're working on and creating visibility to those action items across the team was getting to be difficult. So we went out and looked at some different ways that you can use to track action items, and we ended up going with a tool called Monday.com.
Okay, sure, absolutely.
Yeah, which I'm a big proponent of it, just because I found it works for me. I use it in my personal life to keep track of all the things that I have to do, and so that was a big thing for us. Was it isn't that I need to know everything that everybody's doing, except that we need to have a common place for all of us if you wanted to see or you wanted to be part of the conversation. And so that's what we use Monday.com for. Initially we did what everybody does. We created task lists in Excel, and I just and then let's put it in G Suite. We'll use Google, and out of sight, out of mind. The beauty of that kind of a productivity tool is it can remind you that things need to be done. It can automate processes, and so for us it was to take the drudgery out of just keeping track of all the things we were doing, because at any given time we're working on 8, 10, 12 things, and it's a team of half a dozen. Yep. Which means that you're working on more than one of those 8, 10, 12 things at any given time.
Yep.
It's pay some attention to the infrastructure. The other thing that we learned early on was you can waste a lot of time just building an organization. And what I mean by that is everybody has worked for a company at one time or another before we talk to them, certainly, and they all have a vision of what a company looks like. And in the early days, do you really need all that infrastructure? Do you need to have departments and titles and procedures? Now, as you start to repeat things, you want to write them down so that you don't have to repeat them. So one of the things we did early on was with Monday.com, we created an onboarding template. You talked about companies onboarding, and it was mostly, what are the 10 or 12 different systems that people have to access to, and do this and that and the other thing. Just, it's a simple checklist, but, once we've done it once, why not write it down so you don't have to do it a second time? So just a little bit of fundamental organization, and then the shape of the organization will sort itself out over time. So you can get lost in that, and we've tried not to get lost in just the exercise of organization building, which doesn't necessarily have anything to do with meeting customer needs and therefore driving revenue.
It's a great point. I know a lot of folks talk about early on in the company's life cycle, remaining agile, remaining flexible, remaining non-rigid is one of your biggest competitive advantages. Totally understand that. Love your point though about once you start repeating things, once you start seeing the same things again and again and again, makes it a little bit easier to start drawing up some playbooks on that, drawing up some step-by-steps,
Exactly.
making sure that consistency is baked into the day-to-day. Very, very much agree. Michael, I'd love to pick your brain on the fourth and final CX pillar of feedback. What have been some ways that you and the team at Resume Sieve have really kind of leveraged, not only collected some feedback, but how have you guys been acting on some of the customer feedback that you get around the feedback that you're getting for the tools usage, ideas around how to make the tool better? Talk about feedback for a few minutes.
Yeah, sure. And so for a software company, feedback is critical. Our philosophy is, if a customer isn't asking for it, why are we building it? Now, sometimes you got some infrastructure things, security, some other things. So, we don't want to carry that point too far. In terms of features and function, if it's not working for the customers, why are we building it? So, for example, a lot of the input that we were getting from our beta testers, from the people who were trying our free trial, and the people we were talking to in the sales process is, you need to be integrated to the applicant tracking system to be able to ease our journey. I talked about that earlier. And so we have shifted our development, and we've put on hold some of these. Well, we're going to get the system to do this and that. No, because nobody's really asking for that over there. What they're asking for is, I want you to be integrated. And then once you're integrated, then we can start talking about what are some of the other features that need to be added. And so we gather the feedback like a lot of people, fairly traditional, right? Surveys, or, we'll reach out via email, that kind of thing. So fairly traditional process of gathering it. And even though we don't have a formal product management organization, we do have a product management committee, and we meet weekly, and we talk about what's the input that we've been getting, what do we need to work on for a particular customer, and is that something that is just for that customer? You want to think about it, or is it something that is going to work for other customers, in which case it might be something that we would consider, and then prioritizing that work. And so, our long-term objective, we haven't gotten anywhere near this. We work in an agile environment. Our development works on a 2-week sprint cycle, for those who understand agile development. And today we're about 1 week ahead, meaning we're writing stories now for the sprint that starts next Wednesday.
Okay.
That's as far ahead as we are. Now, ideally, we'd like to be 3 to 4 sprints ahead, meaning we would be writing stories now that are going to be developed in 7 or 8 weeks. But the reality is, things change too quickly, right? It's, for us still, things are changing too quickly. It isn't that we don't know what we'd like to do. It's just that's what we have our product management meeting, and one of the agenda items is to say, are we still comfortable with what we're planning for the next sprint? And if not, what are we changing it to? We had that kind of a conversation on Tuesday. What should we be developing in the next sprint? Should we be continuing with this particular integration, or should we be working on these features which are necessary to be able to run a pilot for this customer? And that's what we chose. We changed direction. We actually are going to put something on hold and bring something else to the front of the list to move forward. So you got to be careful not to overreact. I get that. Otherwise, you're all over the place. I was in shipping. I actually drove ships for a while early in my career, and so I understand the idea of, if you do this too much, what you end up doing is zigzagging across the ocean, right? And small companies are the same way, right? My chairman described it for me one day. The way he looked at the CEO job, you're driving a train. You're building the railroad at the same time that you're driving the train. And so you have to be paying attention to where the tracks go, because once you build the tracks, it's hard to move the train.
Totally. Yep.
It's hard to move the train. And so it's just be aware of those kinds of things. And that's what we are. We try not to move back and forth too much. Particularly the developers will tell you, even in an agile environment, once they've started down developing something, a module or a connection or something, you're better off finishing it than you are parking it and having them come back to the work, because there's so much. It's a creative process, right? Still. And stopping in the middle of this and then picking up something else and then coming back to this, there's some loss. You'd have to do some things over again. So all those things we take into account as we're getting the feedback that we're getting when we're talking to customers.
I love it. I think that's awesome, Michael. I think just a couple of quick follow-up points for all of our listeners to be thinking about constantly. Number one, what's the point of getting the feedback if you're not going to act on it. So collection is one
Absolutely.
piece, assessment's another piece, but action is definitely the most critical part, right? Like take some action. That's one thing that you're immediately making me think about. The other piece is the connectivity product. Michael, I know we were chatting about this the other day, but like I'm constantly blown away by how many businesses who have fully mature CX and CS teams, fully mature product and technology teams, and for some reason, product is almost left out of the incredible feedback that's getting collected. It's like, so wait a minute, you have the people that are going to build the train and build the train tracks and help to drive the damn thing, and they're not seeing any of this information or hearing some of this color or being a
Right.
part of how to understand it better so that they can build for a brighter tomorrow. And I think that that's crazy. I think the other big camp, it's sales and marketing, man. Like constantly blown away by how many times these incredible companies aren't taking a minute to make sure that marketing and sales is also completely aware of what the feedback is, what we need to do better, what we need to focus less on, maybe where we set improper expectations, and then that created downstream consternation, right, for our customers. So I love it, man. There's a ton of great ideas that you've thrown out here for us to be thinking about and to be bringing back to our own teams and our own businesses. Michael, before we wrap up the show, my friend, where can people find out more about you, sir, and where can people find out more about Resume Sieve?
I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. Michael Yinger is how you're going to find me on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook. Our website is resumesieve.com, just like it sounds, resumesieve, SIEVE.com, and we're also on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook. Easy to find. Happy to have a conversation. You can reach me directly, michael@resumesieve.com.
Love it. Well, Michael, it's been our absolute pleasure having you on the show. Best of luck to you and the team, sir, and I look forward to keeping our relationship and conversation moving forward in the future, my friend.
Thank you for the time, Adrian. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Michael.